Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Doppler's Gear Garage. A pleasure to be with you here on this Saturday morning. It is so nice to be back. Holy cow. First of all, in case we haven't, Chris Alexander, you made it, my man. Hello. Always a pleasure. You make my world a better place, but you knew that. And John Mello, hello, hello, hello. Now, I'm not going to do a salutation for everybody. But I will for you. Good morning, good morning. Great to see y'all. Where to begin? First of all, always a pleasure to be here with you. Couple of important things about housekeeping. I'm in the process of redoing what we're going to do with this show. Eventually, we all check out, my friend. But thanks for dropping by. You know that. I'm always appreciative. So a couple of things here, first of all. Emmanuel, what's going on, my man? My guitar says good morning to you. Ciao, ciao, ciao. Or hello, hello, hello. You know, the funny thing is, the second one has arrived, but it's upstairs, and it's black, and it's just as good as this one, and they're really, really, gosh darn it, I'm enjoying it. Now, the other thing that's happening here, I've got this back from my buddy Gary Brower, but I'm still kind of getting some stuff wired in terms of my setup here, and it's just a little bit easier at this moment. I'm plugged into the Mark 7 back there. And we've still got V number 1 over here, so in any case, there'll be kind of something to happen about all of that. All right, hang on a second. Braden, what's happening, man? Ah, gosh darn it. Good morning to you, my friend, and Brenton. Gosh darn it, it is late over there. Hello, 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 and thank you for adding me to your playlist. Gosh darn it, and wait a second, it's Albert. Hold on. I promise I'm not going to do salutations for everybody. But... Great to see you back, and gosh darn it, Eric Martin Bureau. Great to see you. All right, let's get down to it and get down to business. I need some axe inspiration this morning. Well, first of all, I want to thank Brenton because he was... he seems to like me playing through the Mark 7 the most. So I was like... I can feel that. Little neck position. All right, I digress. So let's get to work here. First of all, John, good morning. Good morning. Hello, hello. Anton Shred. Okay, it sounds great on the stream. Thank you so much, my friend. All right, we got work to take care of. First of all, I want input from you. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing, there's a lot of stuff happening in the background. So the first single from the re-release of my first album from 1995, 30-year anniversary, is on Spotify, and we actually crossed, first of all, 5,000 monthly listeners, which is a really, really big deal. And we've crossed the line with, what is the current numbers over here? Well, how many streams? 3,000 streams, and that'll probably go up to 4,000 the next time that turns around. It's a really, really, really big deal. And honestly, there's a lot on the line. So in the process of doing that, I'm kind of spending pretty much the entire waking day working on stuff, and that includes this show, because this is one of the most important things I can do to serve the community, which I affectionately refer to as my family. I don't like the word fan because it implies this disparate relationship. But family kind of implies the people that enjoy supporting what I do, but I consider my musical family, so on and so forth. What's going on, Digital Viper? West Drop D, I don't know why. All right. So here's the deal. I want your input on the sort of things that you would love us to cover. I'm so glad to see you and humbled to be here. So here's the deal. I'm in this album release mode. I'm working in the background on the first single from the new album. And so there's a whole schedule. I'm actually doing stuff that actually is escaping to the world, which means there are a lot of things that I'm working on in the background that are going to be coming public. But one of the most important things that I do on a weekly basis is this show. And it's one of the best ways I can serve the community that I affectionately refer to as family. And Braxel, what's going on, my man? Holy cow. First of all, Henry, hello. The RH Custom, oh, look at that. So that guitar is over there-ish. Whoa, hey, stop that. Hey, no. Whoa. Well, my middle position is not middling. That guitar is coming. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Braxel, what's happening? Okay, so interestingly enough, that is a question that is echoed in one of the things that is one of my favorite things about this show, which is this. So bless his dear soul, Chris always sends through a bunch of questions. So one of the things that is important to the flow of what I want to be doing is kind of having something that's reflecting current events, and that's kind of why I'm mentioning some of these current events. You know, getting this stuff going. Brenton, both you and I are in the process of releasing music. Brenton, are you BMP Project on Spotify there? Hang on a second. Let me just do a little bit. No, I do not want to see an ad. Where are you, my brother? Do me a favor, Brenton, go ahead and post the link to your profile there in the chat there. That would, you were invited to do so, a little bit of not shameless self-promotion. Irfan, what's going on, my man? How you doing? I came from Bet You Can't Play This series. Just discover you. Well, welcome, my man. Great to see you. All right. So welcome. So the deal is, The goal of this time together is to answer your questions about stuff that you're interested in and also present information that's relevant to the things that you're interested in. So here's the deal. One of the things that happens is Chris always kindly puts together a series of questions, not all of which that I always get to. But in addition to the framework of that, one of the other things that is important is also there's going to be always a segment on gear. And one of the things that I'm really kicking the tires on is like a weekly rig. And this is going to kind of echo some of what I'm going to be doing on YouTube, but a weekly rig where I kind of break down kind of what I was putting together and why and how. So first of all, if you like the idea of a weekly rig, give me a thumbs up down below. There's Speed Wagoner. Is there a ballad on the new album? There are, in a classic sense, if that qualifies as a ballad, yes, that's a song called Atmosphere. And there's going to be a guest player on that whose name I won't announce, but it's one of my favorite songs, probably my favorite song from the entire collection. So thank you for asking, but most definitely. Alrighty then. I would love to see a guide to 4-cable method live. Awesome. Hang on a second, I can copy that. There we go. I am adding to this. I absolutely love that. So one of the things that I'm looking at, I'm always, first of all, good morning. If we haven't met, my name's Doug. You got questions, comments, drop them down below in the chat. Don't be a stranger. Griffin, hello. Great to see you. Now, one of the things that happened this week, also, Griffin reached out about the concept of locking tuners. And I actually want to fold that into one of the talking points we're going to cover today in just a moment, which is about making your guitar stay in tune. Because first of all, he's got a guitar. I'm going to presume it is not staying in tune as well as he would like. But the tuners, and I'm going to get more in depth on this in a moment, are part of, quote unquote, the problems that we encounter up above the first fret. So the nut is a huge part of it. So if the nut is not cut well, and or it's become worn, or for whatever reason something's going on there, anything you do with the locking tuners is going to help, but it's really a combination of the nut and the locking tuners. And of course, then we're going to talk a little bit about the bridge. So we're going to get to that in a moment. Steve Greenleaf, great to see you. Hello. All right, awesome, great on the 4-cable method. So here's the deal. Let me dig in here real quick. I'm going to jump to one of the types of questions that I absolutely love that Chris kindly sent through. You were trying out a new amp. Are there any adjustments you make before you start playing, or do you put everything in the middle? There is so much meat on that bone. An amplifier is like a human being. What does it mean? The idea is every amplifier is uniquely different, and its DNA is different. And so one of the important things about an amplifier, when you plug into it, is to try and take whatever your preconceived notion of what it is, go into it with that going, I think that's what this is, because it will allow you to not try and put the amp into something that, a box that maybe it's not actually where it lives. So the idea is that I try and look for information that the amplifier is going to tell me. Now, behind me, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 Badlander amplifiers, and the ones on top are Badlander 100 heads, the ones below are Badlander 50 combos. The difference between the output transformer on those different amps is markedly different in terms of the way it pushes the sound forward. That is to say, for lack of a better way of saying it, how hard it kicks you in the balls. That larger output transformer on the 100 watters just makes them meaner. Hence the reference to how hard they kick you in the balls. But the thing is, you don't always want that kind of kick. The other thing about those amplifiers that I've learned that's so important is how much you're depending on the preamp, because I came from the more gain the better school, so you turn up the preamp volume and turn down the master and you brought it up. What I've learned from those amplifiers that completely reshaped the way I look at an amplifier as it relates to this question is, as you sit down with the amplifier, where does the magic actually happen? Does it happen in the preamp section and getting your drive from there, or does the magic actually happen from opening up the power amp section? So I'm going to turn down here. So one of the things that first of all, I'm going to throw in a little answer to one of the other questions about the guitar camp. So there's a guy named, he's one of the best slide players I've ever seen. Ariel Posen. So he was at Corey Wong's camp, and I spent, whenever I can break free and catch some of these classes, I usually try and sit on a couple of different sections. And one of the things that Ariel kept talking about was headroom. And headroom largely refers to what's happening in the power amp section of the amplifier. And in turn, your ability to make that part of the amplifier kind of begin to give up the ghost, become less efficient. And then in turn, with the volume control, your ability to bring the volume down and still get a little bit of that magic happening. But when you bring it up, you're beginning to hear the preamp section create distortion, but in the right amplifier, you're also manipulating how much drive you get out of the power amp section. And the combination of the two, for me, is where the real magic for quote-unquote the ideal amplifier for me is these days. I want it to be tight enough such that when I go chug-a-chug-chug, it still does that, but that balance of those things is really where the magic is, because it's got enough of that. The thing about having too much upfront gain is you don't have that vintagey kind of because if you think about that Hendrixy type of a vibe, there's something about that where it's not distorted. And traditionally, you'll hear me talk about this, is that the preamp section has a tendency to create distortion, where the power amp section, when driven past the point of its efficiency, begins to create overdrive. And the balance of those two, for me, is the sweet spot. It's almost as if you had a distortion pedal and an overdrive pedal running in series, one to the other, and you just balance the amount of drive you got from each one, so it's not too buzzy, but not too I'm going to say woolly would be a good description of what I'm thinking about. All right, good. Sonny, always a pleasure, my friend. Great to see you. Yes, I hope everybody that is in kind of that part of the country is staying dry or safe. Oh, I love that. Fix my rig. I love that. And so, Fluff does this thing, rate my rig, which is kind of, basically, you send on your rig and he potentially, gives you a hard time about it. And I love Fluff dearly, so let me be clear. But the deal is that kind of giving some hints around the setup would be great. And I love that. And hello to you, my friend. Terry, it was great to see you at Petrucci. Great to see you, my friend. Hello. John, what's happening, my man? It's been a minute. Hello. Ada, what's happening? Is there a difference between a 15-watt head and a 20-watt head? Great question. All right, so I'm going to tack that into this bit about this conversation. That is a 25% difference. So let's just say you're looking at a $150,000. Let's see if I can get $150,000 car versus a $200,000 car. Does it matter? Where that really matters is the headroom, and it's not necessarily how loud you're playing, but at what volume you begin to chew into the headroom. So for me, a big part of the magic, and this is one of the things that Ariel was talking about, a big part of the magic doesn't happen there. It also happens. Now, I have to admit, the majority of my life, I've lived with my volume and tone controls all the way on 10 because, that's kind of what I was thinking. But as I've gotten older and as I kind of get more vintage, I begin to think about, hey, that's all the way up. And that was brought down to about 8. And the deal is your ability to bring it down to 8 and have it clean up just a little bit is that extra 25% of headroom means you can get the amp a little bit louder, for one, but you can also get it a little bit louder and have more headroom and not worry about running out of space you've got with that. So that said, there are a lot of 15-watt heads that do a great job of that. Now, the other thing about all of that space is which power amp tubes you're actually using, because each one of the power amp tubes has its own very unique voice. So if you've got a different tube in the 15-watt amp than the 20-watt amp, then the character of that amplifier is going to be really different. It's a great question. So let's just say, apples to apples, you're just getting an extra 5 watts. If you're going to be in a situation in particular where you're standing next to a drummer and a bass player, that's where that extra 5 watts probably comes in pretty helpful. The other thing, and it was very interesting, where people have a tendency to place the amp. And I watch, one of the things that I do with these guitar camps is I teach basically the 2 afternoon sections back to back. I offer private one-on-one 15-minute lessons, and you get a chance to work with a bunch of different guitar players and see a huge range of players at different levels. And interestingly enough, the majority of them had something in combination with kind of where they were all at differently that was more or less the same. Everybody really wants to play more melodically and have a better command of the neck. I'm going to get to that. But the point being is that it was very interesting is the sense about in the jams that happened after that later in the night, people are not super aware of what the sound is with a smaller amp when it's pointed to the back of your leg versus when you're actually on axis with the amplifier. That is to say, one of the things that you'll see me consistently do is most of these amps, with the exception of the small ones, which I have a tendency to use some sort of direct, so I'm hearing them through the speakers as well, my studio monitors, that is to say, pretty much everything in the room is at ear level, so I can hear what's really going on. So I'm playing through that upper cabinet right there, and that puppy is pointed right smack at the back of my head. Now, it is also coming through these guys using something called Cab Clone IR, which is basically a direct out from the back of the amplifier. And then I'm using a little bit of delay and reverb on the front end here that you're hearing, I should say, I guess on the back end that you're hearing into here. But collectively, one of the things, the ability of the headroom gives you the ability to do is when you bring it down, bring it down, but if you don't have enough volume, you're going to be inclined because that little extra bit of hair you get on the top adds a little bit of top end, and you're going to want that to cut through the cymbals and all of that. So that little bit of extra wattage, it's a great question, but sometimes it's for reasons than just pure volume. It is the combination of volume and headroom. It's a great question. Hey, John, what's happening, my man? The Corey Wong camp. Is that my buddy John, the bass player right there? Hold on a second. That photo is very small in my world here. But that looks like my... Hold on a second. Gosh darn it, that's way small. No, that's a right-hand position. Is that John, the bass player? Let me know. Let me know. Amp on the floor, amp on the chair, amp on lifted stance. So I cannot stress how valuable, even if you put it back down on the floor, to know what it really sounds like coming out of the speaker, because many guitar players are guilty of the amp is hitting the back of their leg, but they actually don't know what it actually sounds like. And I had this happen at a venue in San Francisco, and stage was elevated. I happened to come down off the stage, and I was using two 12 cabinets that were on the floor, and I kind of went, oh, holy cow. Much, much brighter than I thought it was. There we go. So, all right. So I need to tell kind of one of my fun parts. One of the great things about these camps, again, one of the questions was, let's see here. Chris, you're a gem, by the way. An overview of the two camps. And did I learn anything? So John is one of my new best bass playing buddies. And he was kind of one of my guitar heroes. You know, the thing is, you know, as a teacher, you're never supposed to say you have favorites, but, you know, like you do. And so John's a bass player. He showed up. Basically what I do at both camps, the Petrucci camp and the Corey Wong camp, is I get a chance to, quote unquote, work with the folks that it's traditionally called beginner, but it's not just beginners who are in there. So people that are, you know, are when the evening jams come along and after the evening concert, people come in who have less experience playing with other musicians. We kind of work together and kind of help them raise their bar. And so what's great about John is that he has just oodles of natural talent as a bass player. I mean, just, you know, with bass players, they either have the bass playing gene or they don't. And he just does. And so I just kind of kept pushing him a little bit. And there was one point where we were working on this thing. I was like, oh, it had this little rhythmic thing and this little thing where it didn't come in on the downbeat of one. I was like, nah, he's going to get it. And sure enough, he nailed it. And it was one of my biggest joys. I love teaching because you get a chance to give to others that gift of music that helps them expand that thing the way that people have done for me. And so to watch somebody just kind of get up on the bicycle and bicycle away, it's just one of my favorite moments in life ever. So John, you were just so awesome and such a rock star, and I just love that. And first of all, just in terms of the natural bass vibe, you've got it. How is the practicing going? The other thing is he brings his bass to work and practices at work. I'm like, this guy, give him a couple of years, just going to be crushing it. And again, the whole thing is that even if you keep your amp on the floor, hitting the back of your leg, spend some time knowing what it sounds like on axis, AXIS, so you know what's going on. Brad Jensen, what's going on, my man? Great to be here, my friend. You know, on this tone conversation, the other thing I will encourage y'all to do is that, like I said before, I've had a tendency much of my life to just kind of, if the guitar goes to 10, just leaving the guitar there. But when I back it off, first of all, I can back the tone control. And one of the things that I didn't finish my sentence, so I've been working on this thing that I call the guitar harmonica. I haven't gotten haven't figured out a way to get that little get what that got. That one I haven't got yet, but I'm going to work on it. And that happens with the tone control backed off. If I take the tone control, bring it all the way up, but back the volume control. Does much the same thing. In the neck pickup. gradations of color and drive, and the ability to kind of. The other thing that I will associate more with power amp overdrive. That when you dig in versus that to me is that blend of working the power amp section a little bit more than you're working the front end, or at least beginning to blend that in, I should say. All right. Awesome. Okay, so the plot thickens. So again, first of all, I see a couple more comments in there. No, you know, Lewis, I'm playing to the Mark 7. Good to see you, my dear friend. Okay, Mark Turvey, hello. Mark 4 or Mark 5 for live thoughts. Let me get to that in just a minute. Danilo, great to see you. Hello. All right, so let me finish up with Ada. So I've been planning on maybe getting either a Soriatone OTS 20 Mini or a Marshall Studio Classic 20 watt head as a secondary amp. Now, when you say secondary amp, I mean, are you asking like as just a second amp or a second amp to use in combination with the amp that you're already using? Generally speaking, my guess is, well, gosh darn it, my guess is I'm going to need to do just a quick moment. And you know what? This is kind of the fun part about this is what I would do. This is what I would do. I'm going to go to Google, Soriatone, and I'm going to see what tubes are in that, because that, and we've got, let's take a look. You were talking about Soriatone OTS 20. Okay, Soriatone OTS 20. So the difference, first of all, they're very different amps in terms of the style of amplifier. One is going to probably be some sort of Dumbly kind of deal. Let me just take a look at this real quick. I am over on Reverb, by the way. Ratio Master. No, it looks a little bit more Marshall-y in nature. But what I want to take a look, and this is the big thing, is what's happening in the back here. Those look like they are, I'm going to say those are 6L6s, but it may just be the size of this thing. Give me a quick moment, ladies and gentlemen. But the idea is, come on. No more information than that? Oh, come on. Give me a second, folks. All right. Overtone special. No, it still implies it's a Dumbly type of amp. So when you see the OTS sort of a vibe, you know basically they're talking about. There we go. All right, there we go. All right, I'm over on the manufacturer's website. What I'm looking to see over there is model description. I'm looking for the tube set, and this is really the big deal. There we go. It's 20 watts. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. So those are 6V6s. So a 6V6, ladies and gentlemen, is traditionally the tube that is in a deluxe reverb. This matters because we're thinking about the overall wattage, the overall headroom of the amplifier getting into this thing. So my guess is our little Marshall here that you mentioned a minute ago, which is the Studio Classic 20 watt. My guess is that guy is going to be EL34, Studio Classic. But let's actually do a little bit of research here. Almost there. Studio Classic 20 watt. Studio Vintage. Studio Classic. All right, there we go. All right. Now, let me take a look at you. Almost there, ladies and gentlemen. And tube set. 2 times EL34. All right. So this, thank you for your patience. If you thought about the difference between a Strat and a Les Paul, the character, not necessarily that one is thinner and one is fatter, the character of a power tube and the thing that the amp designer had in mind when they were creating that platform. The power amp section is such an integral part of the voice of the amplifier. And the interesting thing is there's way too little attention spent on, like, okay, well, first of all, there's the preamp section, which is where, you know, we get that is, for me, like, you know, there's more going on in the preamp section in terms of the distortion than is happening in the overdrive section. But there's still enough happening in the power amp section that I'm pushing it, that I'm getting some overdrive in the power amp section. So because of that, one, the way the preamp tubes are powered in the power amp section and the inherent flavor of the amplifier, where, you know, Dumble amps originally started off, a lot of the amps that Dumble originally worked on were Fenders that he tweaked. So in many ways his roots are in the Fender world. He also made some amps that were kind of more Marshall inspired, but his most famous amps are really kind of Fendery with a little tiny bit of a Vox flavor in them. Versus the Marshall amps, they've got this markedly British sound, and depending on the vibe you're going for, most people think of a more preamp, distorted type of a vibe. So very, very different amplifiers. So to that end, the fact that they're two different power amp sections using two different tubes implies that they're going for two different things. One is that more classic Marshall sound, but at 20 watts, so it's not going to blow your head off if you're going to use it. The other thing about the opposite of the concept of headroom is the great thing about a lower wattage amp is you can get into that headroom without it blowing your head off. Over there is an amp called a PV Mace, and it has 6 6L6s. It's inconceivably loud, and it has a huge amount of headroom because the 6L6 is kind of, if you will, it sounds a little different, but you could liken it to the big brother of the 6V6, which is a little bit more mild. The 6L6 has got more headroom, and it's just a bigger sound for all the good things and all the bad things. Part of the thing about a smaller tube like a 6V6, generally speaking, it's a little bit more intimate. It's not quite as big. So in a sense, it's hard to make a big amp sound small and hard to make a small amp sound big in a general world because of the fact that you're dealing with the headroom, which is really ultimately going, hey, once I turn the amp up above somewhere between 4 and 6, the power amp section just begins to overdrive more, and it generally doesn't bring up much more volume. But how loud it is when it gets to that point, or how quiet it is a big deal, and that's driven by your needs. Now, there are a couple of solutions around this where you can capture all of that with taking the output of that and then bring that into a power amp. Now, over there, I have the Seymour Duncan Power Stage 700, which is a 700-watt stereo power amp, so it's 350 watts per side. So I could take a quieter amp, run it into some sort of stereo effect, split the signal there, and in turn run that into there, and then I can take it as loud as you could ever possibly want it to get within reason, and the tone doesn't really change. What you're doing is you're manipulating the preamp section to get the amount of distortion you want there, and the power amp section to get the amount of overdrive you want there, blending the two of those together, but no longer being limited by how loud the power amp section actually gets. I love this conversation. This is, you know, what I love about kind of answering questions is we never quite know where we're going to get to, and it was a great question, and I need to think more about how I can intelligently present this in ways that are a little bit more obvious, and do some things that I can kind of present some amps that really define those kind of quintessential tones. All right, Danilo. First of all, hello. So I am playing through the Mark 7 in my suitcase for the Petrucci camp and the Corey Wong camp, although I ended up not using it, was my Mark 525. And again, it is a quieter, powered by Mark 525 power tubes. I'm going to say 6v6, but I'm going to no, maybe I think they're going to be 6v6. No. Hold on. Let's just take a look here real quick. I always feel like time is just crawling by as I'm doing this. Come on, where is my tube set information? The reason since we're talking about this, first of all, this is one of the best little lamps you can buy. It's actually been discontinued. Come on, where's the power amps? All right, owner's manual, fine. Give me a moment. All right, tell me about the power tubes. No, I do not want to do that. Go away. Okay. Rear panel. Tube. All right. Tell me about what's going on with the tubes. It's the great thing about this amp is, first of all, okay, there we go. Okay, so it's powered by a pair of EL84s, and EL84 is like in some ways like the little brother of the EL34, which is traditionally a British style tube. The thing about it is it has a tendency to have some chime and a jangle. You'll find the EL84s in Voxes, so that kind of chimey jangle thing. But the thing about Randall Smith, the guy that designed just the vast majority of every boogie that's out there, and or did some stuff with Doug West, who also was responsible for the Mark IIc Plus, is, they're able to use different tubes and get stuff out of them. So the EL84 is also in this. Come here. Let's see if I can do this without breaking anything. There we go. That is my Badlander 25. And you take a look at the back of this thing, if I can do this without breaking anything. There we go. You can see that those are the EL84s. There's a little kind of a what I call a tube bra on there, but they're small. They're small enough that for many people, they almost look like a slightly overgrown preamp tube compared to a power tube. But that is something that Boogie has kind of baked into their smaller format. So first of all, for a number of the people out there, the Mark 525 is flippin' loud, like crazy loud, like holy flippin' cow. And it's got a great clean channel. It's got a Mark IIc Plus mode. It is a phenomenal amplifier. So the Mark V, the larger version of that, is a phenomenal amplifier. The Mark IV is an amp that I have less experience with. So, given how much time I've spent with the Mark 525, which I love, I do not possess a Mark V. But I have loved my Mark 525. So the idea is that with each generation of these amps, I would say the folks at Boogie kind of take what they learned in the previous generation and roll that into the next one. So if my slightly uninformed version of, because there's a lot of Boogies here, there is not a Mark IV, note to self. Without the benefit of having spent a bunch of time playing there, and without the actual Mark V 90 watt, which was powered by a quad of 6L6s, again, kind of the larger brother, if you will, of the 6v6, I would say that I would go with the Mark V. Without much road testing, but based on my love of boogies, that would be it. I hope that helps. Okay. And by the way, hello, my name's Doug. If we haven't met, welcome aboard. Bring your questions because, darn it, I'm here to answer them. All right, there we go. There we go. It has two 6v6 power tubes. And again, a 6v6 is kind of this beautiful, really kind of It's a pretty tube, and it will get overdriven. But it's a lovely thing. Okay, there we go. Brett, what's going on, man? That track you put up, that was lovely, my man. Really, really pretty playing. Great to see you as always. Mike Mong, 6L6s go to 12. Very crafty, my man. So one of the other things that's happening is I'm collecting questions from people. So my buddy Mike Mong and I go back 40 years, probably. No, more than 40 years. So we met on the steps of Berkeley High School. And he and I have both been on kind of a parallel gear journey. And, you know, he was the first person I ever saw. Is my GE7 out here still on the counter? Well, my box is on the counter. So he was the first guy I ever saw to use probably the most genius solo boost hack ever, which is the Boss GE7 in your effects loop. So for those of you that are like, hey, it comes time for my solo, you know, it's not a matter of like, hey, you know, again, part of the, bring the volume down. Sometimes you just don't have enough extra volume to get up above the band compared to where you are at the, you really need to step on the gas. So something like a GE7, if your amp has an effects loop, to be able to take not only the level up, but maybe shape the tone a little bit. You know, first of all, so I've rolled the tone control all the way off on the neck pickup. So that's actually kind of fuzzy in a groovy way, but sometimes you might want to just take some of the bottom end off. I'm going to speak to all, I'm going to jump over to Boogie Land for just a moment and speak to some of my boogie brethren. So this is, going to jump around a little tiny bit before I pull the tape off. One of the things I'm going to be doing is Tuesday Tips, and originally I was going to do Tuesday Tech Tips, but Tuesday Tips allows me to blend a bunch of stuff in. It's going to be on Facebook, and it's going to be on Instagram, and I'll do it as YouTube shorts. But this is one of the things, any of you that, whether it's going to a gig or a rehearsal or whatever, that blue painter's tape, it just goes with me everywhere. So I'll put a piece on the top of my amplifier, and I'll put it not only across the graphic EQ, but also across the tone controls. You ever have your, like, everything set in the sweet spot, and you get to the gig, and maybe you didn't mark, you know, kind of where things were in pencil and whatnot. You're like, oh my word, all this stuff got moved. So one of the things that's pretty traditional to what I do is I do not do the big happy face on, I think that's 80 hertz there, on the lower fader. Yeah, that's 80 hertz. So the deal is 80 hertz, by the way, in my opinion, you know, the funny thing is you're not supposed to say, oh, definitively blah, blah, blah. But if you're ever in the studio and you're just looking for the sweet spot to make the bass sound more bass-like, 80 hertz is just kind of that perfect frequency to go, bring the bass up at 80 hertz. It's just kind of, for me, that spot where the best part of the bass in a mix environment lives. So the point being is that I actually pull that fader down a little bit, and your average kind of, you know, again, I come from the school where like 10 is great, where all the controls are all the way up. And since I've gotten a little bit older, I'm kind of like, well, the other gradations in between matter. And the other thing is, as I've talked about this before, is if you and the bass player are kind of pushing sound at the same frequency, you get what's called masking, and you start to fight each other rather than kind of going, you know what, I'm just going to let the bass player have that little area over there, and such that there's some extra space in the mix, and it's not like, you know, at the volume that I play at, you're not going to hear the bottom end of the amplifier, but it just allows you to clean things up a little bit. And the sound, first of all, sound tech will first of all take everything on the amp below 100 hertz off anyway, and 80 is already down there. So the point being is like, do yourself a favor and just try it. And, you know, so I don't cut it, but I don't boost it as well. So, but the tape thing is I use everywhere. So that's going to be in part of my tip thing. The Badlander went really well balanced between the preamp gain contribution and the power amp section contribution. The cab clone lets you crank the power section and get that contribution. This is what that amp taught me, and Albert is just so right. And the thing is that if I can humbly say, no matter where you are, there's always really valuable stuff left to be learned. And it always amazes me is as I kind of like, how did I not learn that yet, right? But my favorite part is I'm in learning mode. The funny thing is part of what I'm doing is learning a lot about Spotify. Some people hate it. No names mentioned. Some people love it. But it is a necessary piece of what I'm trying to do to grow what it is that I do. But there's a certain amount that I've got to, by the way, if any of you are on Spotify, I have the Sultans of Strings playlist. It's kind of my favorite collections of Joe's and Steve's and, kind of the famous instrumentalists. My favorite songs there, and I also threw a couple little Doug Doppler songs on there because I could. But the point being is that as you're building a playlist on there, which is one of the ways you can kind of you can become a curator. It's one of the ways that you can kind of offset some of the expense and promotion. One of the things about doing all of that is you can begin to run some meta ads. And in the beginning of the meta ads, you're in what are called a learning phase, where it's kind of figuring out things about the algorithm. So if I can encourage you to stay in the learning phase as long as is humanly possible, it always amazes me all the great things I'm getting a chance to learn. And I'm so happy about that. Now, I also need to take a moment. There are going to be certain things that we're going to do on a weekly basis. And raising them up is one of the most important things we can do. I want to give a big shout out to my buddy Griffin. He sent through some community coffee, and there's still a bag of it floating around, and I am enjoying that. Let me know where it is that you're coming from and what it is you're drinking. I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area with some community coffee and some muscle milk, building my chops or something. All right, let me get back to all of this. Steve, good morning, my friend. Great to see you. Hello, hello. Love that photo. EL84s, come on, thank you. Paul, what's happening, my man? Great to see you. Great singer, great guitar player, great dude. I love my Mark V 25, although I've been using my Marshall. Oh, look at this. So he's right in the zone. Awesome, 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 awesome. Mark 20, thank you, Mark 520. Thank you, Brett. So I've learned. Thank you. I'm selling a guitar, and the trades that have been offered are breaking my heart. A single rectifier 50 head, the one that I almost couldn't stop myself. Oh, wait a second. Hold on. Let me make sure I'm reading this right. I'm selling a guitar, and some of the trades that have been offered are breaking my heart. And then usually I can decipher what that's. A single rectifier 50 head. That one I almost couldn't stop myself. So I don't own one, but there are 3 of them floating around Craigslist these days that they're roughly, on the good day, about 3/5 to 1/2 the price of their 100-watt dual rectifier counterparts. And if I were to say the best deal going on a vintage dual rectifier or single rectifier vibe would be one of those amps. They are, I haven't owned or played one, but having spent as much time at this point kind of in the rectifier family, my guess is those 50-watt single recs are phenomenal amplifiers. 2 less power tubes instead of 4 6L6s. It's going to have 2 6L6s, and yes, you can put EL34s in there. But the kind of, if you will, lower power amp headroom, you don't need to turn that thing up to 10 anyway. My guess is those amps are probably the sleeper amp on the market, and I keep getting tempted. So the funny thing is I'm getting really close to going, what have I got that I can trade for one of those? Because there's one that I keep seeing on Craigslist. I'm like, so Mesa's 25 amp is mini rectifier, Badlander 25 and Mark V 2535 are all EL84 based. Thank you very much. Note to self, gosh darn it. I have a 70s Magnatone amp with swing sound and some scratchy pots. Who works on those? Where are you based? That is the number one thing. So there is a guy here in the San Francisco Bay Area who is my guy that works on a bunch of people's amps. But usually, okay, I'm going to go in the deep end here. First of all, amp techs come in a couple of different sizes, shapes, and colors. They're the really great ones. They're the good ones, and there are the crap ones. The crap ones are the ones you send your amp, you get it back, it's still broken or something new's broken on it because they're just not great at what they do. My strongest suggestion would be to hop on Google and find somebody that's in your area and just kind of see what they're having to say. I'm a fan of some of the dimensions of Yelp. So if they actually have a shop, see what people are saying about them. And that'll probably be a great place to start. My amp tech won't even work on boogies anymore. There's a lot of stuff happening. I mean, what this amp has got going on, it's got 3 channels. It's got all sorts of crazy voices. It's got MIDI. It's got cab clone IR. It's got a ton of stuff that is very different than working on that, which is a pretty straightforward amplifier. They do slightly different things, such that, this is the Frankenstein amp. It's got all these things that have been put together, in my opinion, brilliantly. But the ability to kind of just have, just a simple amplifier where you just plug in and it just does its thing. There's a lot to be said about that. I can see that one of the things that's going to come is having to get some sort of, kind of demonstrating the inherent nature of some of these different amplifiers. So I love that. Noted. Having owned a Mark IV, it's hard to beat in terms of versatility. The lead channel bloom is hard to beat. Analog Man GE7 King of Tone chip in the loop is his way. Okay, that is great to know. So, and King of Tone chip. So I didn't know Analog Man does a GE7, nor that he uses a King of Tone chip in there. But that is fantabulous. That's a note to self. That's a note to, literally a note to self. Hang on a second. Okay. Analog Man, King of Tone, chip in GE7. Okay. Noted. Carlos, what's going on, my man? Oh! That was not what I intended to do. Our buddy Carlos is spending a little home time. I hope you don't mind that I mentioned he had a little bit of a he had some knee surgery, so he's taking some time. I hope you're getting a lot of guitar couch time, my man. I hope the knee is doing great. I love you dearly, but you know that. And I hope you don't mind my sharing your knee story. All right. That's a great playlist. I go to it often. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you for that. All right, Sean Silas. What's going on, my man? Great to see you. I love my Masons. I truly miss them. And I know one day I will invest in a few. The fly dates, I got to do my Kemper. But as the band moves along, and I may get a switch back over. Excellent. Great to see you, my friend. Always a pleasure. Steve, all right, I asked earlier, but you didn't see it. Did you write the keyboard part on Yana's song, or is that just for the solo? It's killer. Oh, awesome. No, I didn't see that, and thank you for repeating that. That is my buddy Mark Bailey. I do not really play keyboards, and not nearly as good as my buddy Mark. So thank you for asking. Yeah, no, that's not my thing. All right, let me just do a quick moment. Let me just see. There we go. Sorry for missing that, my friend. Today, iced coffee. Come on, Black, coming from Vernon, BC in Canada. I love that. Brett, they seem really sweet. They seem really sweet spot for the money, for real. I almost bid on the trade. No, for the money, it's crazy. They're like $900, dude. It's crazy. And if you can do a trade on it, Bay Area. Okay. So shoot me a message, Doug Doppler Music at Gmail, and I'll hook you up with my guy. He's great. Albert, Chris, yeah, that's a nice part on, you know. Oh, thank you, my man. That guitar sounds sweet. What pickups are in that beast? So this is my love story. This is basically a $600 guitar. I haven't changed anything, and in a moment we're going to get to Griffin. Are you here, by the way? 100% stock. There we go. All right. In any case, one of the first things I almost always do on Gibson guitars is I'll swap out the tuners for, wait for it, Griffin, locking tuners. But this guitar stays in tune exceptionally well enough that I'm like, what begin? Chris asked a question, so I'm going to blend a couple of things in here. Awesome. The Lone Star Special Head will be back home Thursday. Come on, repairs and updates completed. Thanks to the gurus at Mesa Boogie. Awesome. Okay, so do you believe certain instruments, this is Chris' question, another one of Chris's questions, they're always great, have a mojo, or do all instruments have it and need to be in the right hands to find it? The answer is no. Like, there are a lot of, it's a funny thing that you'll hear people talk about vintage guitars. Just in the same way you can walk into a music store and you pick up one guitar and it's great, and the next one, the same model, same company, same year, and you're like, whatever it is that guitar doesn't have, it happens. So the idea is different guitars have magic or they don't. In theory, kind of same body wood, same pickup, same everything. But there are guitars, you just pick them up and they just don't have whatever it is, or they don't have what it is that you're looking for. And those are two different things, right? So for me, the journey that I've been on since I spent a lot of time demoing is I'm always looking. Ooh, by the way, there we go. Sometimes you just get some schwutz in your pots. So the point being is that so I think the other part of the question is, when I'm looking for something in the guitar, what is it that I'm looking for? So in the bridge position, and part two is would it have mojo for somebody else? So I think one of the things is that I'm always trying to profile the instrument. I'm going, where is the magic, right? That is to say, let's start off, I'm going to start off in the bridge pickup. I'm going to start off with the volume down. I'm going to kind of go, well, sorry. Let me start off the obvious spot. The first thing that I'll do when I'm walking through a music store is I'm going to go like this. That's the first test. If the guitar doesn't sound good across the strings, I'm out of there. I don't even want to pick it up. We're listening for a combination of presence in the bottom end and presence in the top end. So it seems well balanced, and the mid range is a balance. If it's got too much, usually the thing that you'll hear more often than a guitar that doesn't have it, it's just kind of meh. right? That word is just perfect. MEH, right, with an exclamation point. You're just like, it just doesn't have anything. And so I spent a lot of time playing acoustically and practicing acoustically with, come on, you open sesame, with. So for me, the acoustic sound of the instrument I'm listening for a comment. I'm going to bring the bridge pickup up just a little bit. Tone all the way. I'm listening for, if you were to describe in terms of personality, I'm listening for a little sass. So I bring it up. How does the envelope of that sound open? That is to say, as I go from the kind of sassy, does it open up in a way? Like, oh, okay. Does it take to the onset of distortion? Does it lose its focus? A great place to start is by doing double stops, right? That is to say, if I go to the neck and I take the tone control all the way down, I play a major second. So, and then the other thing is let's back off the tone control just a little bit. So now I'm listening for versatility of styles, right? So we've just gone from all right, the other extreme, I want to hear what's happening in the neck. Oh, that's why my low E string didn't sound right. Duh. So on the neck pickup, ideally what I'm looking for is I'm listening when the gain's all the way up. I really like when a Les Paul sounds like a Strat, but with a little bit more girth. Right? So it's got enough top end that you kind of go, is that a Strat or Les Paul? It sounds like a Strat. But the other part is when you back off. And again, as you bring the volume up, what's the onset? In terms of the amount of gain, is it kind of, if you will, that what I like to refer to as the envelope, the way it kind of expands and contracts. And in turn, as you kind of begin to interact with it. broke the string. All right, well, the other thing about that is now what happens when you listen to the blend, right? Get out of there. And there it's kind of taking on, if you will, the onset factors of both the neck pickup and the bridge pickup. And, the interesting thing is that I'm not always a big fan of the middle position on a lot of Les Paul guitars. And this guitar sounds really... I guess one of the other things I'm looking for is what happens when I want to play fast, right? And, also making sure, like if it was an older vintage Strat, for example, what happens on more crazy bands, right? So that's a major second and a minor third. Can I make that bend without it kind of losing its losing its thing? All right, hang on a second here. There we go. Let me catch up here. Here we go. Hold on. There we go, Griffin. We're going to get to you in just a hot second. There was a required mod in the effects loop, the little tube. Did you have that done? Are you talking to me or are you talking to Lewis? That's what I want to know. Would have, and then we got to the Mojo for someone else. So generally speaking, I think we're all kind of looking for a lot of the same thing. That is to say, does it kind of do something when you hit it? The other thing that's important, if I didn't mention this before, not with the tone and the volume controls, but actually just playing the guitar. How does it respond? How touch sensitive is it? So generally, guitars. Probably, if I were to say, what is it about mediocre guitars that makes them most mediocre? Is it kind of when you begin to apply more to it, they just kind of go, yeah. They just kind of don't have much personality. They can look really pretty. It's one of the reasons that, generally speaking, I don't buy things on looks as a general rule. But, the funny thing is I've got the second one of these that I just bought because I love this one so much. I spent some time earlier this morning working on the rhythm parts for what will be the first single for the new instrumental album. And this is going to be one of the guitars that I'm going to be using because it's so different than the V's. And you like that contrast, right? But this guitar stays in tune really, really well. And I kind of throw most anything I can do at it, and it just kind of keeps on ticking. I've been really, really impressed. And the black one is more or less, they did a really great job of replicating the neck, and they sound really, really close, which is, I will say this affectionately about Strats. I don't know about you, but I have never played two Strats that sound the same. And that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but if you want two that sound really close so you can swap between the two of them, just never had that happen. Hello, Eric. Great to see you. Much appreciated. Hello, hello, hello. I don't plug guitars in when in the store. It doesn't feel or sound right acoustically. It goes back on the wall. And, literally, I just go along and like, that's going to tell me most everything I need to hear. If it's just kind of like, I'm just like, nah, it's not going to go anywhere. Got to hear it acoustically. Come on. Link for the GE7 noise headroom. Thank you very much. Look at you. Copying that. Pasting that. Look at you. Thank you very much, my dear friend. Rampage forever. Okay. I'm limited in tech options here in Northeastern Ohio, but every tech around here bashes boogies about the wrong voltage caps, cheap build quality, and being noisy. I haven't experienced any issues or overly noisy, but I'm not. So I'm going to gently, sorry, let me bring this in, and anybody on a phone that's going to be tiny. I've had tremendously great luck with all the amps here, and at this point, there's just there's a little boogie farm. They're great amps, and the guy that works on my amps who's kind of the guy in the San Francisco Bay Area. He doesn't have anything bad to say about the Boogies. So, different people have different opinion. I would disagree about the build quality, but, to each their own. Do I use any splittable humbuckers? So that is a conversation that is coming around this. And Griffin, I haven't forgotten about you. So this is the new V. See if I can do this. I'm famous for dropping stuff on this show. So let's not do that. So here are the two Vs, and amazingly, they sound, there we go, get something. They sound really, really alike. So I'm really happy about all this. So this here is the new guy, and that is a DiMarzio noiseless P90 in the bridge and a mini humbucker in the neck. So one of the things I'm going to be doing is going to be splitting that mini humbucker on some sort of push-pull. So the biggest bummer in the world is push-push pots. If you put your guitar in a case, and I check my guitars because I've had zero problems with it. The big deal is you got to make sure that there's no way that the headstock is going to come into contact with the end of the case. If it does, then you're going to potentially end up with a broken headstock. But if the guitar is fixed with the body here and is well supported on the neck, and there's no way for the neck to be in contact with the end of the case, you really have to go out of your way to break the headstock. And they don't have a tendency to break anywhere else, but with push-push pots. So, and the challenge is, I love the push-push. I don't like a push-pull, but they don't get broken in the guitar case the way the push-pushes do. And I've literally seen one come from transport and literally just kind of see that it was broken. So it's a bummer, but so that will be getting. This doesn't have it. I wish it did. I'm going through them. Going window shopping. So this is the Mark 7. Great amp, and it's Brenton's favorite. So there you go. Was talking to Brent. Okay, good. Oh, nice. Love the star on the P90s. Awesome. All right, Griffin. So we did a whole bunch of stuff on this guitar. And the other thing that we did was we put the jack here, but we're actually going to move this further up because as we discovered when I'm sitting practicing, the cable hits my leg. So we're going to move. We need about 2 inches girth here to be able to do that. All right, that gets us to locking tuners and tuning. So one of the questions that came through was from my dear buddy Griffin. By the way, if you guys again have any like weekly topics or individual one-offs, please drop them in the chat. I would love to do that. Where there's kind of a weekly grab bag, or that stuff that spills over and I can kind of build. I always love the idea of America's Test Kitchen. Melissa, my wife, has these books in America's Test Kitchen, where they also have a TV show where they try different things and you get a chance to hear them and hear some sort of relative expertise opinion about, like, well, this is what happened when I plugged into this and this is my takeaway. What do you think? In any case, so Griffin's question, he's got a guitar. I'm going to presume that it's having tuning issues. So Griffin, first and foremost, is it when you're using the trem or just in general? Because with Fender guitars, so the guitar that he's got is a Strat style instrument. And if you're going to use the tremolo on those guitars, generally speaking, it will not stay in tune. That is to say, when I say using the tremolo on those guitars, I mean really using the tremolo on those guitars. The string has a tendency to slip inside the block, has a tendency every so often to get stuck at the bridge on the saddles. They definitely get stuck at the nut. One of the other things that you can know that if it's the nut, and it's a good way to try it, is actually just twist the tuning peg. And just in case you didn't know, you always want to tune from flat to in tune. And so you'll hear bing. So that is the string getting caught at the nut and then kind of coming free. So one of the things that you can do as to help is utilize a little pencil graphite in there. So that is to say, so Griffin, and anybody out there that has any guitar that's having any issue with the nut, So let's just say we're going to go on the low E string here. We're going to slack that string there. Going to bring it up like this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use this part of the pencil here. We're going to use on the bottom part of the string and on the top part of the string. And generally I do that over the kind of the cut in the saddle there. And what will happen, I can already see that happening. You probably won't be able to see that there. Well, actually, you can see some of that has fallen down into that groove there. And that's just going to help this string glide a little bit more easily. Now, the thing is, silly me, I know this, you're actually supposed to do it a little bit further down on the string because by the time you actually bring that string to tension, it pulls through more like that. Also want to talk about kind of when I put a new set of strings on, I have a tendency to do this, and I will tension the string with my thumb here. You can actually see how the flesh goes white. And then I will do the same thing with my first finger and my thumb, and then I will kind of take the string and kind of, here I'm using my thumb and my index finger, and then when I get down to the opposite end, I flip that around. I use my the end that I'm coming from, I will use my thumb and my index finger towards the end I'm going towards. And then I'll flip that around and do that. Not like that. There we go. And I'll usually do 3 or so back and forths. And then I'll give the string with my hand right around the 12th or 15th fret. Because one of the things that will happen most of the time, as we know this, the string has a tendency to break right there at the bridge. So by tensioning it here, I'm not putting any additional tension on the saddles there. And that allows me to make sure that any extra string that's on the tuning peg there then I'll give it another. All right, so here's one of the things about all of this is that I used to stretch my strings a bunch more. I shared that in a post somewhere, and some old grumpy dude, don't become an old grumpy dude, kind of, you're doing it wrong, you know. So first of all, the way that works for you is the way that works for you. I found that generally after about 15 minutes of playing, about that much amount of stretching allows me to keep some of the life in the string as long as I'm comfortable with it stretching a little bit. If I've got to go into a gig or I need to start recording right away, I will stretch the string more to the point where it won't give it all. But I find that you lose a little bit of the life of the string sonically. Now, one of the other things about this that's related is how do you know, and Griffin, we're going to get to all these other points in just a moment, how do you know when a string needs to be changed? Well, first of all, there's one string in particular that for me is always the answer, and I actually can tell that this guitar needs to be that. If you run your thumb, let's go back over here. If you run your thumb underneath the D string, right around here, if you can feel the pinning from the frets, that's kind of telling you, okay, you know, it's probably time to change them. And so there's a little bit of pinning there on the bottom side of the string, which is why you want to run your thumb along there. And that's going to tell you, like, hey, you know, it's like, now here's the thing. The D string may not be the string that's going to break. That high E string there was going like, hey, you know, the D string would have told me everything I needed to know about needing to change the high E string. So just as a general rule of thumb, that bottom side of the D string is a great indicator for that. Okay. All right, so back to Griffin's questions. Trem with occasional high bending on G and B string. Oh, yeah, it's the Eric Ailes Magneto signature. Trem with occasional high bending on G and B strings without trem. Okay, so a couple of things about. Okay, great. Give me a moment. We can do this. All right. You. Now, one of my least favorite things is using a right angle jack on a Strat, so I'm going to swap these here. You know, while we're doing this, I'm going to go over another one of my little tech things. Let go of my chair cable. All right, so one of the things that I do is that I will run my cable. Oh, there's reverb. There we go. I will run it through the side of the handle on my cabinet here. You probably can't see it that well, other than the fact that I've got the two different ends of it. And the benefit of that is, obviously, if you happen to kind of step on this guy, let's see, let's hold this like this, and you trip on it, it's not going to tension the top of the head there and potentially pull it off with leverage off the top of your cabinet. That would obviously not be a good thing. And I saw a guy do that at one of my 7th or 8th grade school dances, and it was not a happy moment for them. The Marshall head came toppling off the top of their amplifier there. So I'm always doing this because, first of all, I generally don't have a tech. And so if I don't do it and something goes wrong, it can be exceedingly awkward, and I'm the guy having to fix it in the middle of all of that stuff. So, all right, let's do this, and let's do this. Now, I absolutely love this guitar, and if my buddy Chris Alexander is still here, he also is the thing about this guitar, you use the tremolo, it doesn't really want to stay in tune. So first, Chris, he is here, all right. Now, personality. So, first and foremost on Strats, once you start using the tremolo and potentially bending, depending on how you've got it set up, you run into a couple of different problems. In a perfect world, they would stay in tune perfectly, but they don't. So there are a couple of decisions that you want to make right off. So there's kind of, if you will, the downward spot of the bar and the upward spot of the bar. Generally speaking, if you do a fair amount of tremoloing, the upward spot on the bar is what you use to kind of pull the strings back over the nut. And a well-cut nut and some graphite is certainly helped there. The locking tuners, now interestingly enough, Griffin, what I want you to do, I want you to depress the bar. I want you to give the G string a stretch and the B string, and I want you to take those strings and bring them up to pitch, and then do a couple of tests, because I am thinking that per this thing, and this is why it was going to take more than email to answer this question, and I'm going to do exactly what I just talked about here. Oh, right, I keep this guy tuned down a half step. But one of the things I can do to test, if the problem is in fact the tuners, is I've got this G string tuned to F sharp, which I guess means it's an F sharp string. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a couple of bends. Oh, I can flip this around. There we go. So watch. So there that is. And I'm giving it enough of a bend that, like, it's not slipping. So that's telling me that tuner is fine. So on my Gibson style guitars, the G string in particular and the tuner, they just have a tendency to go flat. I don't quite know what it is. So that's one of the first things, as soon as I kind of test and find the guitar is not staying in tune. That Epiphone back there stays in tune exceedingly well. Let's see. Greenie, I replaced and put locking tuners on there. Before this V had the tremolo on it, I put locking tuners on there. Just for whatever reason, the G string and the tuners seem to just like to go flat. So just like, okay. So in terms of brands, I have a tendency to navigate between a couple of different brands. I think at this point, most of them are good enough. I spent a little bit of time doing a bit of research this morning. I found an article by Guitar World, and I also, my favorite place to go when I really want to see how things measure up in the general public. So I'll go over to Sweetwater, and I'll put in locking tuners, and then I'll see, first of all, what's the most popular, and that'll come up. I don't know what drives their algorithm most popular in the past 24 hours, 7 days, 4 weeks, over the year, over all history, but then I'll go in and read the reviews. And I think at this point, I'd say that as long as it's like Fender's making locking tuners, which I'm sure they're really good. They probably don't manufacture themselves. They quite probably buy them from another manufacturer and put them on there. For example, Godo, a Japanese company, makes a lot of products for different companies. So Grover, Godo, these guys are Grovers. The Godo, I presume they make a locking tuner. I'm sure it's good. Spurzl was kind of the original brand of locking tuners. That's what's on Greenie over there. In my opinion, if you're experiencing any issues relating to the tuners, a locking tuner is a great place to go. And I think at this point, I've kind of tried a couple of different brands just because of what Gary, my guitar tech, Gary Brower had, and we just put them on there, And this is a brand that I actually wasn't familiar with, but they're great. And in any case, so the deal is with the tremolo. I want to talk about this for a minute since we kind of talked about the tremolo bit. The deal is that with a stock tremolo, if I kind of... All right, so first, where do I start? So I go through and I stretch all the strings, right? And I will generally... At this point, I'm gonna go with the downward spot on the bar, and I'll show you why in just a moment. But I'm gonna go through here and stretch this, and I'm gonna go from low to high and get the guitar. And I will go a couple of times just in case you didn't know this with a tremolo that's floating like this one is. As you go through here, each string has kind of this interactive quality on the other strings. Whoa. And then there's the weird thing that this guitar does, which it's just its own little kooky thing where the high E string just goes crazy sharp for no particular reason when you use the tremolo. It's just an imperfect system, which is why when I use the tremolo in a demo, I'm always just super dainty on what I'm doing. And again, I'll go through and I'll kind of reset it a little bit. And I hope I'm not boring you to tears here, but this is, for those of you that do dabble with this thing, yet the high string again is sharp. It just does this wacky thing. There's no explanation. I just like to do that. Now, quick little hack for those of you that have locking fine tuners. If you change your strings and you go through and it's like, oh my word, I keep going. If whatever the guitar is going sharp or flat by, tune it that same amount in the opposite direction. The guitar will tune itself into tune. So for whatever reason, I haven't. It looks like it's here at this point. Let's see what happens by the time I get to the high E string. I've never actually tried that on the high E string there, but let's see what happens when I get over there. No, now it's there. So, all right. So as I do bends on this... All right, interestingly enough, and it may just be that I didn't... First of all, when you have a couple of different guitars, it's a really good idea to kind of go through every so often and just tune them all, because as they sit... Did you hear that little click? That was the nut. So that's telling me that there's also a little problem with the nut. One of the other things that begins to happen is sometimes the string will twist. And so if you can imagine a string that's twisted, the catch of where that twist can be sometimes I think can be in the nut as well. All right, it's close-ish. if I use a tremolo, overall pretty good. But that was only downward. Now I'm rocking. Pretty good. Now, the advantage of keeping the bar when I'm done that. Anytime I use it, give it a little bit of a pat down. Now you're hearing the problem. So, you're in the middle of a song. What are you going to do? So the other trick with the bar is to pull it into the upper position. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do the same process and pull it in the upper position. And I'm going to go through and tune. Yeah, now it's going to go sharp. However, the advantage is as follows. Who knows what's going to happen when I get to the high E string? It's going to probably be all kind of actually pretty close. And generally, there will be two different spots pitch-wise between the lower and the upper spot. Sometimes that's just the way the bridge wears and whatnot. But when you're done, you give the bar a gentle pull up. And what you're doing is you're pulling the bar up and you're gently pulling the strings back across the nut. I'm going to go through and give it another little tune here. And I'm going to show you the advantage and the disadvantages of this approach. So that's a reasonable amount. Now what I'm going to do is pull it up, and so what happens is pulling the bar up pulls it into tune. The problem is as follows. When you do a big bend, it pulls it to the lower spot and you're out of tune. So, what does that mean? It means that if you're going to do some gentle tremoloing, the bottom spot's probably the way to go. If you're going to do some serious flogging, the upper spot is the way to go. Just be aware that if you do any serious... you're going to probably need to correct that with the bar. It just is what it is. But it works pretty well, and in my opinion, if you're going to do any serious flogging, the upper position seems to be the solution there. Okay, hang on a second. All right, let's check this out. So, Griffin, getting back to your original question, these are stock vintage style tuners, and generally speaking, I don't think, with the exception of a Telly that's here, any of my Fender style guitars have locking tuners on them. And so it certainly doesn't hurt to put locking tuners on there, if for no other reason. First of all, there is a certain amount of drama when you change strings of the string settling around the peg, and a much faster string change. Generally, with a locking tuner, the tendency might be to just go straight through the tuner and then clamp it and have it locked there. Quite often the lock is just right here on the back. I find that I have a tendency to go about one string tuning peg or 1.5 length, and the string winds down a little bit, I find that it has a tendency to work a little bit better in general, and I just find that I prefer it for it to come down a little bit. The other thing is what that will do is it will pull it down. It will pull it down in that direction such that the string, as it relates, that little angle right there, I think, in my opinion, makes the string stay in tune a little bit better, as opposed to kind of being parallel with the neck. Now, it may have the exact opposite problem, where it's actually that's what's causing that string to get stuck on this particular type of configuration. So I need to ask Gary Brower about that. All that to say, the graphite at the nut will help. Putting the bar in, even if you're not going to use it, and probably putting it at the lower spot, giving everything a big, 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 big stretch a couple of times through. And then if you bend, it's just in tune. And I think you're probably going to have your best luck that way. So keep me posted. The other thing is, if you hear as you're tuning across the nut, bing, bing, any of that stuff, that will mean you want to probably take it to your luthier and have them do just a little bit of adjustment at the nut. Every so often, over time, the string can kind of, if you will, kind of chisel a little kind of berth in there, and sometimes you get little burrs that are in there. And sometimes when whoever it was that was working on the nut in the first place wasn't paying attention, maybe they were checking their emails, they were kind of working on the nut there. But either way, I think that will help with that problem. Again, you can do things like you saw me do, get everything perfectly in tune, put the tremolo at the lower spot, give that string a nice stretch, get it perfectly into tune, stretch it a couple more times. And if you stretch on the G string and it doesn't go flat, it's not the tuner, right? Then, as a corrective measure, putting some graphite on the nut and deciding whether you're going to use the bar in the lower position. Hope that helps, my friend. Keep me posted. I have not tried the JP2C rack mount. Expert advice. First of all, I have not tried it. The JP2C is one of my favorite amplifiers. There's one thing. So one of the things that's kind of coming a tiny bit later than sooner, there's going to be a Badlander roundup, and then there's going to be a Boogie big boy amp roundup, where I'm going to be kind of rounding up all the 50 watt amps that are around here that are in current production. The JP2C is going to be in there. By design, John likes the clean section of that amp really tight, because in Dream Theater there's so much sound going on, and he plays. He uses a compressor when he wants to kind of loosen up the clean tone, but he likes what he describes as the sound of a piano wire. And so, so it's, again, if you think about all the drums and the bass and the keys and the size of the orchestration, that's why that really crispy, clean tone is important for him. For somebody like myself, it's the one thing on the amp I prefer the clean tone on. Let's get over here. Let's get over here. I prefer the clean tone over here on. All right, hang on a second. Oh, by the way, middle position for clean tone, probably the worst possible choice you could ever make. Let me get here and let me do a little bit less of that. Oh, come on. So the funny thing is, I got to talk about this chord for a minute. So, as a bunch of you know, I play at church. There's a local church in my town that actually hires me, and I don't say no from time to time to go play. And I'm playing tomorrow. Really, really great band, by the way. Normally I refer to it as the team, but this is a lot of the people who play there are actually for hire. So this chord is on this chart. This chart, it's the craziest collection of chords I've ever played. I'm playing chords I've never played before, but I want to, there's always a little bit, I'm going to get back to the questions that are in the queue here, but I've got to talk about this. One of the things that we are always going to cover here is some sort of theory thing. And one of my favorite things is the concept of building chords in what I call parallel voicings. So if I were to take the 1, 3, and 5 of each mode and add the 6, oh, sorry. That'd be... Ah. Now this chord right here is, I would normally call that a G. There's my G, the octave, the flat 3, that'll be B flat, and that's going to be an E flat, which is going to be the, if you will, the flat 6 up the octave. And because there's no flat 7, I'm going to call this a G minor add flat 13. Or you can call it a G minor add flat 6. Because the 7's not in there, you can go either way. But basically what it is, it's basically take the minor triad and adding the relative 6. But I would normally think of it as a 1 flat 3, sorry, 1 1 flat 3 and flat 6. But what the way it was on the chart was an E flat over G, which is another great way to think about this chord, which is not a way that I've seen it written before, and it's not a chord that's very frequently used, but it kind of gives you another way of looking at kind of looking at this chord. So so you could then kind of take those triads and march them. Oh, there we go. And that's oh. All right. Oh, I'm getting myself in all sorts of trouble here. In any case, that's basically that's the 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 over the that is the that's the 3 of the 1 chord. So basically it's yeah. So that's the 1 chord in first. Wow. Okay. Sorry. Stupid just has resided in my brain there. So all it's doing is taking. Oh wow. That's just so learning something. Like I said, humility. All right, so the deal is these guys, this is basically, and it's a wacky key. It's E flat, F, G, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E flat. But that's in first inversion. We're just doubling the 3 in the bass. but my brain's not quite there yet. But it's a very interesting chord that I would normally just think of as there's my 1, my octave, my flat 3, and my flat 6. And if I were to play it diatonically, and then we got to go here. That's right. Right. Let's see if I can spell this out entirely. 1 1 3 6 1 1 flat 3 6 1 1 flat 3 flat 6 1 1 3 6 1 1 3 6 1 1 flat 3 flat 6 1 1 flat 3 flat 6 1 1 3 6, and they just kind of have a basically what I'm doing is I'm going this the 6 to the 5, the 6 to the 5, flat 6 to the 5, 6 5, 6 to the 5, flat 6 to the 5, and this is one that I blew a minute ago, flat 6 to the flat 5, and 6 to. So on and so forth. All right, I have a lesson that starts in a couple of minutes, so let me just get caught up here on anything here. I hope that answers your question, Sean. They're phenomenal amplifiers, and as long as you don't mind a tight rhythm, a clean channel, they're phenomenal. You can also use a compressor. I prefer. I would probably take a little bit of the top end off, but I had it set probably for Gibson. Really cool guitar and a great sound. All right. Yes, we do learn something every day. Chris, I know you love this guitar. I did hear that too, by the way. I don't remember what I was playing, but so that once you kind of, what I don't necessarily know, other than I need to find a definitive way of testing when the string is getting bound at the nut. There is because one of the things that can happen is there's enough that happens as the string comes through the back of the block and works its way basically at a 90-degree angle and comes across the saddle. There's lots of places in there that as you begin to depress that, I'm going to choose to believe that for the most part, because the overall tension on the string, it doesn't move around that much down inside that shaft because there's enough tension on it that I think it's probably not moving around that much there. However, one of the other things that happens, and you'll see this on the Floyd, the screws, and I've seen this for a fact, you'll begin to see these indentations on the backs of the set screws there where the bridge is kind of gnawed away at that. And the same thing happens with the two posts from the Floyd where the first of all, the knife edges on the bridge, those will get indented, but you'll also begin to see some wear on the studs that sit down into the body, more so on these 6 screws, especially the more vintage style you go. I need to try and figure out a definitive way to test that little bit of business. I guess the well, there's this other factor that begins to happen as well, and this is why I kind of am in favor of kind of the idea of keeping a little bit more of a downward angle there when the string comes across the nut. In that, if you strum really hard, the string has a tendency to bounce around and can kind of bounce up above the nut. And it's a strange phenomenon. It's one of the things that I'll do when I go to play a bass, where I would normally stretch the strings a whole bunch on a guitar. With a bass, I'll kind of hit the strings like this and try and get them to kind of bounce to wherever they're going to sit. I will tune up to pitch. That's a must on any instrument, in my opinion. But you kind of, and the other thing is that if it's cold, I'll run my hands up and down the strings to let the string expand, because a cold string, once it begins to warm up, will stretch and it will go flat. So the idea is, before anything, when the guitar is cold, I'll run my hands against it and just kind of warm up that string, and then I'll tune always below the note. Even if I'm really close, I'll come below and bring the string up to it. And then kind of that whole thing, like this. Same thing on a guitar. I'm going to play a lot of. That string has a tendency to jump up and down above the nut. And sometimes what will happen, and I don't necessarily know the physics and mechanics of this, but sometimes that string will just, in the process of kind of getting excited and jumping up, as it sits down, it will not sit down at the same place in the nut there. And, you know, if you've ever spent a lot of time playing a lot of, you know, part of that style. Hold on. Keeping an eye on the time, and I got to go in 1 minute. It's bashing the daylights out of that string together. And so the string just has a tendency to bounce around a little bit, then, you know, more than when you're playing kind of something more like that. All right. When I worked at Fender, I was always wondering when the engineers didn't just figure out the issues with their drum, but I guess that's the nature of the beast. What's going on, Brent? Great to see you. Hello, hello. How many maces? I don't know. I haven't counted. Sean, thank you, my friend. Brett, what happens if you take one size larger nut to file to the slot? So the challenge can be is that if you create too wide a berth, the string can then move back and forth. And now what happens is you've got a spot. Ideally, it should be just a straight line, right? So I'm not gonna say it, nut slicer. Gosh. But the thing is, you kind of want just it wide enough so that the string just fits in there straight. But if you get that channel too wide, then the string can kind of sit at a spot that's not straight, and then it won't stay in tune. And yes, nut sauce is great as well. All sorts of nasty jokes waiting there. Griffin, thank you, my friend. Locking Tuners, with great pleasure. Much love and respect right back at you. Jim, hello, my friend. Came in from mowing, pleasantly surprised to see you still giving a lesson. Thank you. My pleasure, my friend. Braden, what song? That was in... And I got to go 1 minute ago. Hang on a second. Come on. Where is my... Why isn't my song showing up? Come on. Hello? Did I minimize you? Where are you? Give me a moment. That's totally strange. Where are you hiding? The song is King of Glory, and it's got the craziest chords ever. So in any case, all right. Brett, thank you very much. Griffin, thank you. Tony, I love you dearly. Eric, always a pleasure. Sean, thanks again. Chris, Albert, love you guys. I'll see you next week. Doug Doppler Music, Doug Doppler Music at Gmail, rather, sorry. And by the way, I am dropping the next single on Friday, so if you get a chance to head over to preferably Spotify, but also Apple Music is great. I'll post the link. We're going to have something going out towards the end of the week in promotion of that. Just thank you for all the support. Really appreciate. I'm going to affectionately start using my favorite phrase, family. I just want to thank my family. I'm getting used to kind of this next phase of what it is that I'm trying to do, and the family, the people that support what I do, that are part of my extended family, means a lot. Have a great one. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time around. Cheers. Bye for now. All right.